So a lot of people in this cycle have been talking about Texas maybe being in play, and I think it's an incredibly optimistic idea to think that Texas will flip in this election. But there is some reasoning behind that. Texas has increasingly become a purple state. I think even Ted Cruz himself says that Texas is at the brink or already is a purple state. If you go back to the peak of Republican strength in Texas, and we go back to George W. Bush, who was a resident of Texas, he won that state back to back, winning upwards of 60% of the vote both times, with the Democrats not even hitting 40%. So we're talking about 20 plus margins of victory in the early 2000s. Now, well, if you look at the last presidential election in 2020, Trump only won the state of Texas by about 5 points. A big reason why you might have seen some new attention on this issue, the idea of a blue Texas, is because there was a poll from Emerson recently which showed that Trump was going to win Texas, but according to that poll, it would only be by 4 points, so even less than 2020, and there was a significant margin of error there, considering a race that's that close. So it could be even better for the Democrats if that polling is accurate. I'm not too interested in looking at why this change is occurring and why this state is becoming red. There are plenty of people that are smarter than me that have already this week broken down like shifting demographics, city growth in Texas, and all those changes. I want to look at, assuming this happens and Texas becomes either blue or purple, what does that do to the national political landscape? What was most surprising to me was that if you make Texas blue, keeping all other things the same, in the last 7 presidential elections going back to 1992, the Democrats would have won every single one of them. Even 2016, where Hillary Clinton lost by the biggest electoral margin of any Democrat since the 80s, she still would have, assuming there were no faithless electors, she still would have won the 2016 election with 270 votes exactly. Now, of course, if Texas was reliably purple or blue, politics would have absolutely shifted because the Republican Party as it currently exists, or rather as it has existed since the 90s, has no path to electoral success on a presidential level without the state of Texas. Texas currently has 40 electoral votes, which is second only to California. It is the largest reliably Republican state that exists in the country. To give you a sense of how important it is, since the 1924 election, 100 years ago, I can list off every Republican that has won the presidency without carrying Texas. Richard Nixon, that's it. Texas is a foundation of the Republican Party. If it's gone, what you think of as the Republican Party will not exist. The party will quite literally burn to the ground and have to entirely rebuild itself. That is how crucial the state is. Now, of course, it won't be an immediate switch because Republicans will fight for the better part of a decade to try and get that state back into the red column. But if it, in the Republican nightmare scenario, becomes something that leans Democratic or is even, God forbid, reliably Democratic, the Republican Party is going to have to start finding support in places that it would not dream of appealing to in this current political climate. The scale of what the Republicans would have to do to stem the bleeding if they lost Texas and still find a way to get to 270 is kind of ridiculous. They would have to not only win back the Sun Belt, get Arizona, get Nevada on hand, they would then have to go back into the South, get Georgia, and then sweep the totality of the Midwest. I mean, they got to pick up Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, because those 3 states equal slightly more than Texas. So in this ideal scenario, where somehow the Republicans have lost Texas, but they pick up every swing state, just barely, they get to 272 electoral votes with no margin for error. If they don't pick up one of the marginal states, they do not win. Look, this is a fantasy. This is a Democratic fever dream of like the utmost proportions in terms of like what could possibly happen to their advantage. But I think it's worth talking about because people aren't just looking at Texas because, oh, if it flips, suddenly Harris will like definitely win. It's not only that, it's that if Texas flips and continues to trend in the way that it is, we are talking about something that will completely upend one of the 2 major parties in American politics.